Hello YouTube, welcome back. As you can tell, I'm still not at Nutkin Farm, but I do have an update that's going to interest a lot of macadamia farmers. Hot off the presses today in mid-March 2025. First signs of what the macadamia price is going to be for farmers for the 25 harvesting season. And the news came from the biggest player of them all, Marquee, that mops up about 40% plus of nuts grown in Australia. And the price, without any delay, is $4.22. And that's very interesting because the consensus of the market would be that we might reach $4 for the nut and shell price for this season. And for those of you comparing, it's again on the same usual basis that we do nuts in Australia: 33% kernel recovery, 10% moisture, and obviously the higher the kernel recovery, the higher the price you get. And Marquee in their email were the first to point out that if you've got something like the benchmarking average for your farm, your prices will be up around about $4.50 a kilo, provided your reject levels are within spec. Now, the full details of the offer from Marquee are yet to come out. It was really just a headline email that got issued today, but very promising. It looks like they're aiming to pay for about half the crop early on and finish all payments for the crop by the end of the year, as in the end of 2025. You know, in previous years they tended to push it over to the next year, although in recent years they've tended to close out the payments by about Christmas time. Look, it's still nothing I'd pat them on the back overly much for, but it's better than making you wait until March the following season when your next season's nuts are falling. So $4.22, what do we think about that? A lot of farms are going to be profitable at $4.22. I think you could give Marquee credit for pulling out all stops to provide that price, but we'll see what the others do. It's not often that Marquee are the first offer out, and I'm not absolutely sure they're the first, but they're the first major player out this year, and being the largest, so many other processors will set their price based on what Marquee offers, and they'll often tweak conditions around the side and offer earlier payment or some stage later payment. It really depends on what suits you, where you want to put your money in terms of this financial year or the next one. But $4.22 reaches the point where, certainly on the 2023 benchmarking, which sort of suggested that a price of about $3.60 would be break even, $4.22 has some profit margin if you're running your show productively. Obviously you've got to produce the amount of nuts, but also within cost time frames and cost guidelines, in terms of if you're not spending too much on labor, fertilizer, pest control, that sort of thing. It's a relatively big jump from where we were before, because we were looking, you know, around the doldrums, around $3.20 odd for the last season, and $1.70 before that. So the rise in price has actually been steeper than what most people would have predicted, and certainly steeper than what I predicted. I suppose it's going to depend a little bit on whether this offer is mirrored by other processors, including the one you might normally go with. But it's a competitive offer, and it's up to the rest of the industry now to see what they can do to match or beat it. I have my spies out. I hope they're being reliable and they're going to send me those offers, and I'm going to do a full comparison for you the way I have done in the last couple of years. So if you want to hang on to that before you make a decision, that's great. But certainly the nuts are already falling, and sometimes they've been ripped off by the remnants of Tropical Cyclone Alfred. So there'll be people anxious to get their nuts in, and obviously equally anxious to know what they're going to be paid for them. So good on Marquee for at least not waiting till Easter this time, and we'll see how the others go. So looking ahead, I'm going to head up to the Northern Rivers as soon as it's practicable too. It's still very wet and muddy up there, and obviously when I get up there I want to do some work, but I also want to, for those of you who aren't in the Northern Rivers, do a little bit of a tour of the macadamia growing district and show you a little bit of a damage report from Tropical Cyclone Alfred. And in places I'm told it's not pretty, that the winds did cause some substantial damage, not just to older trees, but sometimes to some younger ones as well. And so we'll do a little tour of those districts. If they could make a cyclone that would hit the macadamia industry harder, I can't really think of one, although I think Bundaberg, while it might have had some higher than normal wind and rain, probably escaped the worst of it. And at the end, some of the Northern Rivers did better than the other. I noticed that the AMS has still put out a crop forecast that's higher than last year, but at least this time they've had enough realism to say, well, we're going to have a review of that once we look at the tropical storm damage that has definitely occurred on a lot of orchards. How did you go, guys? Maybe put a comment in below. Is this price cold comfort? Do you think you can still harvest your crop? What do you reckon? Love to hear from you, especially if you are in the Northern Rivers and in those areas that were affected by the storm. It would be a bit of a tragic irony if, you know, for the first year we're getting a decent price, we can't pick up our crop. So let's hope for good news. Tell me all about it. Talk to you soon from up at the farm. Bye for now.